Hey guys, before we get started with the episode, I just have two announcements to make. One, I have the Jibs Journal is out now. I send a weekly journal through email every single week that covers episode highlights, tips and tricks that the entrepreneurs in the show have gone over, and just other cool things that are happening. If you're interested in being subscribed to that journal, the link is in the description. The second announcement is I've released a course. So the course is how to crowdfund for your passion project, your side hustle. I crowdfunded over $65,000 in less than 90 days through my organization called Research Detroit. And the class is going to cover, the nitty-gritty details on how I did that, how I delegated the tasks with my team, the templates, the samples. It goes into full detail on how to run an effective crowdfunding campaign. So if you're interested in taking that course, the link is in the description as well.
It's just about getting up and doing it and finding the time, finding the people, and making it happen.
You take control and you say, okay, this needs to be done, and you do it.
And you're never ready to start a business. You either do it or you don't.
Welcome to the Jibs Podcast, showcasing Detroit's movers and shakers, bringing you stories that reveal the gusto and grit that's long defined the city and its people. Together, we'll uncover the history and direction of the Motor City, one voice at a time. This is the Jibs Podcast with Jibran Ahmed.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the newest episode of the Jibs Podcast. I'm here with Paulina and Samantha of Playground Detroit. How are you guys?
Great. How are you? Awesome.
I'm doing fantastic. We're in this beautiful space with art all around us. So let's just get right into it. Can you guys tell me who you are and what Playground Detroit is?
Sure.
Yeah, I'm Paulina Petkoski. This is Samantha Sheffman, and we're the co-founders of Playground Detroit. Playground Detroit was co-founded in 2012. We are an art gallery and creative talent agency, so we work primarily with emerging Detroit-based artists and musicians and creative entrepreneurs to give them job opportunities and present their artwork. We also work as a cultural media company, so we have an online magazine and our social media channels, so people, not just in Detroit, follow what is going on here locally, but there's also a larger audience on kind of tapping into the pulse of what's happening in the city.
Yeah. Can you kind of tell us about the exhibit we're surrounded by right now?
Sure. This is these are paintings by Danny Sober, and he actually, his background is in drawing and illustration, and after taking a hiatus for 5 years from painting, he jumped back in and made 13 new works in a 10-month period. And the whole theme around them is summer and warmth, so that's what's really reflected in them. But these are really his first paintings that he's ever really made, and they're oil and acrylic, and they're just super playful and play a lot into his own experience, both with digital and art history and different sorts of topics that you can really see reflected in every piece. Everything's got a different storyline and hidden meanings and gestures and stuff. It's really cool.
Yeah, it is really cool.
It's cool because it incorporates all these different styles at once. It's he deemed it kind of pluralistic, so it's kind of just like Instagram or the internet, where you're looking at all these different things, but they all come together in the same place.
Yeah.
So it's very cool.
It's a really modern concept too. It's
Yeah, I noticed that.
But it's a traditional, painting form.
Well, yeah, the oil painting, I'd say.
Right.
Which is the really detailed stuff you see, like this bike rack or the hands behind you.
Yeah. So, you were talking about how you guys bring in emerging artists. Mm-hmm. So how do you find these artists?
A lot of them have been friends of ours for many years, and some of them have introduced us to other friends of theirs who they think really deserve a platform to share their work on. We get submissions almost daily. We find people through the internet. We're always looking. We go to the CCS student exhibition every year. We go to the Cranbrook Open Studios and student exhibitions every year. We're just constantly looking and constantly in communication with everybody in the creative community.
And how do you determine who you're bringing into the space?
Well, that's really, for starters, it's the look of the work. If we think that it's really forward-thinking, really great craftsmanship, something that's just really exciting that would stand out internationally, that's very critical, of course, because that plays into just sales and strength of that artist. But even more critically in a way is that artists' dedication to their own practice, their willingness to put everything that it takes into becoming a full-time artist, because that is the most difficult part. You know, our hope is that these artists do so well within the space and other commissions that we get them that they don't really have to have side jobs like being a barista or something. You know, we hope that their side jobs are just more creatively focused.
Yeah, and so are most of your artists Detroit or Metro Detroit based?
Yep.
Absolutely.
So in your experience, how do Detroit artists stand out among artists nationally and internationally?
Well, I mean, I don't know if it's like subjective or objective. I think it's, I think that there's definitely some really incredible artists based here, especially coming out of Cranbrook's program or CCS's program.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there are a lot of artists here that already show internationally. And so I think it's just a smaller group of people. So I think, our talent is exceeding a lot of other cities because we have so much history in the arts and music. So I think the quantity is low, the quality is very high.
And also just like the history here, I mean, there's been artists for a long time. We work primarily with emerging to mid-career artists. But I think that you'll also find and hear from other artists that they have the time and the space to create here, which I think makes it a really good place to be an artist and develop your craft, as opposed to trying to be in other cities like New York or LA that have art markets, but they have really high cost of rent, they have small spaces, and there's not such a sense of community. So here you have a lot of artist collectives, you have other artists supporting other artists, and doing like DIY gallery spaces or artist studios where they hold their own events, and there's a really sense of camaraderie as opposed to like intense competition because the stakes are so high that you find in other cities.
Right. Looking back at the past, couple of years, the artists that you've had in the space, can you think of an artist that, came in the space and then when they left, they started getting, phone calls or people reaching out to them?
Sure, I think every single artist that has shown with us, their career has excelled. I think it's also because we tend to work with them in really good timing where they finished a really, really strong body of work and they're ready to explode and share that with the whole universe, right? Mm-hmm. So they hit they're also very business-minded, or at least we can help them with steps to become more business-minded. So they know how to utilize social media or just other ways of sharing their work. So I think that there hasn't been a single example of artists that have shown with us who haven't grown immensely after or during that time.
I mean, but to be specific, there's two that I can think of right now.
Sure.
Like Wheezy, we gave her first solo exhibit in Detroit. And that was before we had the gallery. We did a pop-up at the Will Leather Goods. It's the Jonathan Adler gallery space. And she came to us and she was like, I really want to have a show, which is great because, she does a lot of mural work. So that was particularly unique. And that was a couple years ago. I think that was in, it was maybe
2015 or 16?
I don't know. I mean, no,
It must have been 16.
I have no
It
idea.
must have been 2016.
And then the first solo exhibition that we did in the gallery space was with Nick Notion.
Yeah.
And I think that was a really incredible exhibit because he had also just created a strong body of work that was pretty different and kind of evolved from some of the other stuff he's done. Mm-hmm. And then from that exhibition,
Which was his first true gallery exhibition. He had done a lot of produced his own exhibitions.
Right.
But then the Kobo.
We sold two of his largest pieces in the show to Kobo Center's permanent collection. Wow. So now they're on view, and he's only the second of two emerging artists that they've collected, and they've had their collection since the 1950s. So, now his work is on view to the public to like millions of people every year.
Yeah. Like the what is the train called?
The people mover.
The people mover. It stops and the doors open and you exit right in front of them. Right?
It's on the same level, so you're walking literally past them.
Yeah.
So I think those are two really, great examples. But we've worked with so many artists; it's really hard to just pinpoint it. Even Danny's exhibit has been incredibly well received, and it just opened 2 days ago. We had people begging to see the artworks list before the show opened.
Yeah.
So it just really depends on each artist individually, and we just try to work with them to support whatever their goal is or whatever their vision is.
So before we move into your journey as Playground Detroit, let's say there is an artist watching right now or an artist listening. Like, what kind of advice can you give them if they're emerging in the city, or they're discouraged because maybe the money in the beginning is not that good, or there's just different pressures on them? What kind of advice can you give them?
I mean, first of all, just be conscious of how you interact with the people around you, because you never know who's a collector, you never know who is a curator, you never know who has a gallery space, and so you want to be presenting yourself professionally and seriously, when you're going out and you're going to other gallery events or you're putting yourself out there. The other part of that would be social media, making sure your website's updated, having your portfolio current, good images, and
Great images, really
Instagram, just do it yourself as much as you can, and then know when to ask for help. I think it's really important to just be self-aware and approach people in a way that you'd want to be approached. So if you are interested in doing an exhibition, putting together an exhibit proposal and sending that over via email. We take online submissions through our website, but it's also about the right fit for the gallery. I mean, there are other galleries in the city, and some of them are just catered to different audiences or different mediums. And so, doing the research on your own before you start making moves, I think is super important, because that tells the person who you're communicating with your, goals, that you've already thought about stuff. Because sometimes, we're happy to take a studio visit with somebody if we're interested and there's work to be seen, but sometimes the timing is just not right. And you have to understand that, it's either not your time for a solo show, or maybe we're thinking of a group show that your work fits perfectly in, but that's not necessarily something that the artist has control over. So, you just really have to be professional as an artist, as a working artist. It's incredibly important.
And proactive.
Right. I think that's good advice. So
Thanks.
yeah. So you guys started in 2012.
Yep.
So why did Playground Detroit become a thing, and how did you guys meet? What's your background?
Well, we had met in high school, but I reached out to Paulina when I moved to New York. We had only sort of known each other. I'd been in a photo class together in high school. So I reached out, and within, I'd say 6 months to a year, she had been back in Detroit for a little bit and came up with a concept for a festival, which I'll let her.
Yeah, Playground Detroit was a response to a lot of the negativity that people had in New York because of the bankruptcy and the mass media just talking about how terrible and terrifying Detroit was. And I knew otherwise. I grew up here and I moved to New York for college and my career in the fashion design industry. And I was just sick of it, and I was like, I don't want to tell you about Detroit. I want to show you what Detroit's like. And so the original idea was a weekend festival, and it was bringing out Detroit musicians, Detroit artists, just kind of making a really interesting, which is very indicative of how Detroit parties have always been. It's a combination of both. It's never just one or the other, which I think you find in cities that are very isolated and they have music venues and they have art galleries. Here you just have empty space and somebody throws together something and it's a mix of all of that. So the idea was to kind of bring that to New York and show people there some of the cool, inspiring, talented, creative people that were doing things here that would totally, go against what was happening in Brooklyn at the time.
But what ended up happening after putting on pop-ups of screenings, exhibitions, concerts, and so forth, one thing that we realized that the artists here really needed help on the ground and support and guidance on the ground. So that was one of the reasons why we decided to move back. And another was that the overhead would be too high if we wanted to open up a space of our own, which was becoming something that was a really important goal for us, because it can be so difficult just to be using different people's spaces. First of all, the costs are usually higher, you have to follow their rules and so forth. So that was really kind of the impetus for us to move back here and open up a space in Detroit.
And then really, I moved back in 2014 after things in the fashion industry had shifted around, and I just made the long-term decision to build a business and not be at the whim of other industry pressures that could change rapidly. And so I moved back here, and Samantha moved back here, and then we started doing events in an Airbnb space that we were managing. It was a 6,000 square foot loft in Corktown, and one of the bedrooms became available, and Samantha was like,
This
let's
is our
do
moment
it.
to create the proof of concept.
So we turned a bedroom into an art gallery, and we started doing solo exhibitions there. And the first one we had.
It wasn't that many people.
I mean, we
maybe 100, but the last exhibit of ours was Patrick Ethan. Again, that was his first solo show.
Right.
He had never exhibited his light-based work before, and like, not exaggerating, there was 400 people in the space. It was incredible. So that was when we were like, okay, there's something here. Where we had started taking business courses and had really laid the groundwork for the structure of a proper business instead of just a passion project. So that's when we started looking for a building that we could move into and renovate.
Is this the first building you guys are in?
Yeah, this
This
is
is
the
our first
time.
permanent one.
Yeah, first brick and mortar.
So you came from the Airbnb space here?
No, we had a few iterations in between. One of them was at Pony Ride, which really was just an office space and an artist residency program, which connected a local-based artist with an international or national-based artist. So we did a couple versions of that.
And we turned their loading dock into a gallery.
Exactly.
So we have a history of turning things into gallery spaces. But
that was fun. And then we did pop-ups, like a Detroit is the New Black, and windows over at David Klein Gallery. As she mentioned, Real Leather Goods. So we just didn't stop, but we had this going on the back burner in the meantime.
So it's been, what, like 5 years? Or wait, 6 years.
Yeah.
Right? So in these 6 years, I mean, you started in 2012 when a lot of the investment down here was
just getting started
and barely. So how did you come to a space, and what kind of response did you get from your friends and family of starting a space in Detroit?
Oh, I mean, my parents almost like threw a fit. They were like, "You're not moving, Megan. That's crazy. That's insane. The city's not ready. Don't do it. Just stay in New York. You have a real job there." And I told them that like this is the second or third time that I think that they had questioned my risky career moves. Like another time I had left the jewelry industry to go work at a gallery in Chelsea in New York where I was being paid much less money and I was working like twice as many hours a week, which like I had a full-time job, but that gallery thing was insane. So, and my mom was a gallerist as well, so they knew what I was getting myself into, and they're like, "That is nuts. What are you thinking?"
Right.
So now they'll probably never question a move again. But my father teaches at CCS, and eventually, I'd say like a year or two after I moved back, which was in 2015, David Klein Gallery moved his gallery into a second location downtown here. So I think we were just ahead of the curve, and we knew from our experience in Brooklyn, seeing the way that city evolved based on industry and economy, we were seeing a lot of the same sort of things happen, especially like we knew the buzz that was happening around Detroit. So,
well, I think intuitively, as a designer, you know, you're always thinking ahead. You're always looking at trends and seeing what's going on and putting those pieces together culturally. So that really informed, you know, my decision to make a long-term shift instead of being in the rat race in New York, having a teeny apartment, working full time, have no place for me to make my creative work, no family there, and my friends started to move into other neighborhoods. Rents kept going up, and I'm looking at it where I'm like at the end of my 20s, and I'm like, what do I have? Nothing, you know, and then thinking back into taking control of your career yourself and becoming an entrepreneur. My father's an entrepreneur. He's a master architect, and he had his firm in downtown Detroit in the 90s, and he was pushing for loft living in the 90s when people looked at him like he was crazy. But I think it's about just being ahead of those trends and following your intuition. And so coming back here was really a sustainable choice, like long term. It was like about long term establishing roots, setting up what used to be like a satellite, like we were Detroit satellite in New York, but really it's like here, moving back here and launching a business, creating economic impact in the city itself, trying to merge this like outer Metro Detroit area and trying to bring them along with the rest of the world into Detroit and say like, look at what's here, support what's here, and building a foundation that, you know, not only can we start a business and grow the business, but inspire other people to hopefully think that, okay, well, they did it. I don't have a background in business. And it's possible, and it's possible because of the unique circumstances that the city offers. And it was just really, you know, if it doesn't work out, we can move back to New York and I can get a job.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I didn't move back to Detroit to get a job. It was to create jobs for other people and build something, you know, for the community. If we wanted to just take the easy road, we wouldn't be here.
Right.
So it was a conscious decision.
So you talk about some of the pushback from your parents, but let's talk about
first.
Right. Let's talk about like professional pushback. So, what kind of response did you get from people in the city, like other business owners or people that have been here for a while?
We've been so supported.
Oh yeah,
We've been so supported.
Thrilled, and we're kind of in a niche part of the industry because we are specifically working with local-based artists, and I think pretty much everyone, even people that work in other fields, have recognized how important that is. So, and we create a different energy. A lot of galleries can feel a little stuffy or intimidating when you go into them, and everything about Playground is playful. Like, there's definitely a high energy. There's always music when people come in, and like, it's just created a really good energy for both the youth in the creative community and then like adults and collectors who like are interested in supporting or just experiencing something fun and fresh.
And even for that matter, for like in terms of other businesses, we've collaborated. You know,
Right.
like I said, Will Leather Goods opened their doors to us. Lululemon, when they moved downtown, they asked us to curate a bunch of artwork in their space. We've worked with them multiple times on other locations that they've opened up. Like Detroit is the New Black. We have a great relationship with them, and we've hosted multiple exhibitions there.
We still do the windows at David Klein Gallery.
There's a lot of collaboration between us and other businesses. Even Depop is the interior design firm that helped us build out the space, and now they hire us for some of their clients. Like even a firm in Brooklyn, we did one of our artists, Dustin Cook, did a custom clock, like a grandfather clock. He painted that and shipped it out to them. So now people that we had hired are now hiring us, and so it's actually really really great.
It also creates a good platform for other companies, especially like in the booze industry. Right. So like we have an ongoing relationship with what's the
Eastern Market Brewing
Brewery,
Company.
and we used to use our vodka for a lot of our events. We've worked with Two James. Was that our opening? Drinks and that kind of stuff is always a good component. But also even just supporting the other creative spaces in the city. People find us online when they're visiting, so we are not only like encouraging tourism, but we're sharing information with these tourists. We're not like keeping secrets about who else is in the neighborhood. We're sharing.
It's like Wasserman Projects is, right down the street in Eastern Market.
Red Bull's right down the street. Like if you found
Heidelberg
us,
Project, Heidelberg Project has obviously been in the neighborhood for about 3 decades at least, more. And when we moved into the neighborhood, we started going to the community meetings for the area and have been working with their executive director. She's super supportive of us. We help promote their Detroit Live festival that they've done in the summertime. And so there's definitely connectivity and support even for other people that are in the same space as us.
Yeah. So you guys talked about, moving from not just a passion project, but moving into a business, fully operating. So what kind of advice would you give people that are aspiring to start their own businesses in Detroit?
Well, I think in general, whether you're in Detroit or not, think about what you want to be doing on a day-to-day basis. It was super important in terms of taking this from a passion project to a business, is actually if you're creating your own business, then what do you want to be doing, and making sure that the hard work that you're getting into is something that you want to do every single day. And even when you don't want to do it, you still have to do it.
Yeah.
But I think more specifically in Detroit, you have to be aware of what are the needs. what's the need of the community, of residents, of whatever industry you're trying to serve, and fill that need. Because, you know, I think Detroit's so creative because it's like a problem solution based system, you know, where the government and other entities have not been there for the city and the residents itself. It's like local entrepreneurs or, you know, other people, or even just residents in their own neighborhoods that are like, okay, like people keep dumping trash here, we're gonna do a community pickup day, done, next. You know, so it's like you've gotta really figure out like what's not here already and how can you contribute in a positive way, and just be conscious of who's already here. And do your research. You know,
there's so many resources here for grants, for business programs. I mean, like that aren't even necessarily associated with a college, but other organizations like Michigan Women's Foundation. So I think just kind of researching and maybe even getting like an advisor, a mentor to help you along the way, because having the right team behind you, like there's a lot of people working with us and nobody ever meets, nobody ever sees, but we couldn't function without them. We have like a great lawyer, a great bookkeeper, a great accountant, you know, just really important advisors and mentors and people that work for us that have helped us with every step of the way. We really couldn't be there without the great team that we have.
I mean, even just like you said, like BizGrid, you know, specifically is a great resource, and that compiles all of the things she just mentioned into one thing, so you can find exactly what you need at what stage you're at. There's just so many things.
Yeah. So let's talk about how you guys work. So I can imagine you guys are buzzing around all the time. Your heads are a million miles a second. So how do you like keep yourself organized, efficient in everyday work?
I think our process has evolved. We both really have different responsibilities. I mean, for me, I kind of manage the business as a whole, like on the aspect of the bookkeeping, accounting, website, you know, digital advertising, and a lot of the events that happen in the space. Samantha's really hands-on curatorially. She does all the installs, she handles the artwork, she does a lot more work directly with the artists, and also establishing collectors and you know, client relations. So in terms of that, like we basically just have our responsibilities that don't necessarily compete, but they you know, sometimes overlap, and you know, we have to work back and forth. You know, she'll start here, I'll start here, we'll end up here in a lot of different ways. But overall, I mean, it's just like self-discipline, using Google Calendar is king.
And
if we didn't have our calendar,
just because it's easiest for us to share files.
yeah, so we use a lot of cloud-based systems, and just having our I mean, it's a lot of it's cool because it's a lot of app-based things. It's,
right,
it's
like
G
our
Suite,
archiving system is an
Google.
app.
Yeah.
So we're just getting into all that too. It's really just being self-motivated.
Time management is super important.
That's
making
the
sure.
hardest. Depend on a lot of 12-hour days as an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It just well, I think the thing that I've spoken about recently with some people is it just doesn't stop. You don't have the satisfaction of like putting in a hard day at work, getting in your car, going home, and being
And
like,
not having to
whatever.
think about it.
You know, and you don't turn off. You
Right.
don't turn off. So it's actually more so not about like how do you work. For me, the conversation has actually switched over. It's like, how do I find time to not work? And being conscious about separating those. So if I'm, you know, I don't know, at my family's house, that I'm not on my phone, I'm not checking email, I'm not doing social media, because technically I could, and I probably should be. Or just defining, you know, a day of the week where it's like Sundays, you know, we try not to really focus on work. I mean, we have to, we do, and we will, but I think that's more important actually than the work is taking a break for yourself and taking care of yourself.
Like
Self-care.
exercise,
Yeah.
eating right. You just have to have
Basic,
a healthy body.
basic stuff that nobody tells you. Like,
But I think a lot of people, especially in America, just don't consider those things.
Yeah.
Don't really do those things. But that really affects your day-to-day functionability. I don't know if that's even a word, but yeah, because that will affect your energy. That affects how you're mentally able to process everything.
Sure, absolutely. So in the next year, 5 years, 10 years, what are you hoping for Playground?
One of the things that has always been a really big goal for us, I mean, first of all, you know, when you talk about building a business and you want to create assets for the company, We don't currently own our space. We'd love to have a really big warehouse space. You know, when we were starting, we had to make a decision about whether or not we were for-profit or non-profit. And part of the reason why we chose for-profit is, first of all, because we wanted to make it clear the value of the artist's work every day. This is not a charity, as Paulina says all the time. Secondly, we didn't want too many chefs in the kitchen, delegating how the business should be structured and run when it was in its infancy stages. But we think that will be a critical component in the future, in terms of having an artist residency program again, building a permanent collection of our own that the gallery, is collecting from each exhibit. And then we had, if we had a warehouse, I would imagine being offices, a gallery space, or a museum area, and then a residency space. So that's more of the longest term goal. I'd say our shorter term goals are really just kind of leveling out with what we've already built and kind of catching up with ourselves and just having a really, really, really clean system and rhythm. We're just starting our archiving system. We're just starting to be able to build.
So, question I like to end on is, what to you makes Detroit so special?
I mean, community is I think that's the word we've used the most. That was the title of our opening exhibition. As we mentioned in New York, I think what happened when the prices of housing and studio increased so much, people were pushed away from each other. And so it was harder for them to support one another and to communicate with each other. And also it's very much each man for himself out there, because there are so many artists and there are so many galleries. It's extra competitive. In Detroit, we were still lacking so much retail, so much industry, so much of an audience and market for artists that people are more supportive of each other. There's definitely more of a Midwest vibe where people are saying hello and asking who you are, and they really care and they want to see the whole city grow. So that, for me, emotionally especially, is what keeps us here and was so inspiring and exciting to me as we got deeper and deeper into it, because I didn't necessarily expect that because we had lived in New York for so long. And then the other side of it is just the history that Detroit has in arts and music. It's really the longevity of that, I think, has made it continually just cool and creative, where a lot of other cities that are maybe coming up, even Cincinnati, they don't really have a history in arts and music as Detroit does. So I think that's what makes it very special here.
I agree with all of that. The only thing I would add for me is just the uniqueness of being here at this place and time. I think every city or every movement, even when I was younger, that I was really interested was Haight-Ashbury in the 60s or New York in the 80s, and I was I'm never gonna have a thing like that. I want to be a part of something that felt important, culturally, and I truly feel that time is now. And I said, my dad was here in the early 90s. I've, grew up in Detroit, and to see the city where it was, 10, 15, 20 years ago to when I moved back here, just less than 5 years ago, that transformation is happening right in front of your eyes. And that's really interesting, because really a lot of cities don't find that they're experiencing change at that rate, and even such a rapid transition, all these things happening or opening and being torn down, buildings, it's history's being written right in front of us. And it's not just being written, it's we are a part of that. I think that's incredibly interesting and unique to the city, which is why I love doing that. Even just because I work in fashion too, I've done photo shoots around the city, and some of these sites they don't exist anymore. And I think that's super interesting to just be, experiencing things that people in the future are not going to, and then be a part of trying to figure out what's next, what's coming, and having a voice in the conversation. I've recently been asked to be on the Kobo Art Steering Committee. We're on another committee that's representing creative economy and infrastructure in the city, and that to me is like where I'm most interested in participating, because that's impact, and that's making sure that at least if there are not artists at the table, that there are people, you know, like ourselves that are representing those voices at the table when it comes to development and public arts and design thinking in general. Just having someone creative to be recognized in all of this tech space and real estate and food and, you know, just all of it. It's infrastructure. You need to be conscious of how do arts and culture play into that, considering we don't have an arts council right now as a city. I mean, we're a national public city, and it just blows my mind. So there's a lot of work to be done, but I'm glad that we're here for that, and that we're being, you know, asked to participate in that way.
Yeah, it's a great answer. For people listening or watching, how can they find you guys if they want to connect?
At Play Detroit, playgrounddetroit.com. We're on pretty much every social media channel, and have a Vimeo page which with like retrospect, like all of the exhibitions we've had pretty much have video documentation, so you can get an entire feel for a lot of the work that we've done.
Yeah, cool. Well, Sam, Paulina, I appreciate you guys being on the show.
Thanks for having us.
We're super excited. We love your work.
Thanks. And until next time, guys, stay tuned. Cool. Thanks, guys.